Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly discussion series that's being hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. And today, my special guest is Stephen Coates. Hello, Stephen.
Shalom. How are you?
And he knows all the Middle Eastern languages, so you'll be surprised during the interview. And I met Stephen, we were just talking over 10 years ago, and
Right.
we've been following each other's works, and he's doing
Yes.
such amazing work, which I will read his
Thank you.
bio. So Stephen, he was born in Portland, Oregon, and at the age of 4, he moved with his immediate family to Sanaa, Yemen, where he spent 5 of his formative years enjoying the sights and sounds of Yemen's rich culture and history. That must have been so exciting. So moving back to the United States in 1980, he lived in Idaho, and during his high school years, his interest in story, filmmaking, and the media was cultivated. This eventually led Stephen to enroll at Biola University in California, graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in Communications with an emphasis on radio, TV, and film. After college, Stephen continued pursuing his passion for story in a variety of media production and story development roles at Warner Brothers Television, Sony Pictures Studios, Craig Anderson Productions, and Kevin Gale Productions. Stephen currently works for SIL International as an international media consultant, as well as serving as the director of Sabeel Media. And as the husband and father of 3 children, their family have cross-culturally served their diverse immigrant and refugee neighbors in Dearborn, Michigan for over 17 years, and he currently resides in Raleigh, Colorado. Very
Yes.
interesting background.
That's probably too much. I sent you too much.
And you know what? It's not too much, because I think the background is very interesting, beginning with the fact that as a child you ended up living in Yemen. And I think
Yeah.
that story is what cultivated a lot of the projects that you're involved in.
Yes, most
Work.
definitely.
Yeah. And so I kind of felt like that in itself kind of tells why why Sabeel has the
Exactly.
material and those that they do. So let's go back to those years as a child.
Okay.
Yeah, your childhood in Yemen. So what was that like? What was that like to spend your childhood
Yeah.
in a foreign country
Well,
like that?
yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. Yeah, Yemen was amazing. I mean, I miss it so much. It's a tragedy to see what's happening there now. It breaks my heart. So when I think back, the Yemeni people were um, stuck in my mind. So I was there for 5 years. I was 4 years old when we went till I was 9. The people are just loving, humble. I think the word humble comes to mind. Very open, hospitable. We never felt afraid or we always felt like our neighbors were there to protect us, to get to know us. They had a curiosity to find out who we were. We were from America, of course, but it was just an amazing place. The sights and sounds of Yemen. I remember the call to prayer. I remember the bakery across the street there was a guy who would sit down on the ground and he would kind of bang out these bread pans, and the smell of this bakery was amazing. And if you know much about Yemen, I have a visual for you.
Oh,
If you've seen the houses in Yemen, they look like this, and they have these amazing stained glass windows, and they always sit on top of a rock. And so, the wisdom and ingenuity to put your house on a rock, it makes me think of the parable of Jesus, the house on the rock. A wise man, he builds his house on the rock because when the rain and the storms come, it's not going to fall down. So that's always been my impression of Yemen, is these houses on the rock. I saw Yemen through the eyes of a child, really. I had no judgments, really. It was just very much wonder and adventure and learning and absorbing. There wasn't any kind of like, oh, why do you do that? Or how do you do that? As adults, we kind of tend to criticize things or approach them in a different way. But I saw it through the eyes of a child. And then just the last thing I I remember about Yemen was the diversity of people. There were Somalis there, Ethiopians, there in the expat community. There were internationals from all over. The school that my parents taught at, the Sana'a International School, had people from, I don't know, 40 or 50 different nations, you know, diplomats and a lot of Yemeni kids also. So I kind of grew up in this diverse situation and learning and appreciating the differences among us and saw them as a good thing, you know. So that's what I remember. And then you think about the challenge of coming back after a time in Yemen. I think that was the hardest, you know, for me, was not living in Yemen. It was, I loved it. But when we came back to this small town in Idaho, I just felt so out of place. I was a fish out of water. I probably was more Yemeni than I was American. And so it took me a long time. I didn't know all the pop culture references. I didn't know Star Wars. I didn't know what's American football. I didn't know any of those things. And I had to figure it out because they thought I was pretty weird.
Well, yeah, living in an Arab country versus, you know, the suburbs or a small town in the United States is totally different. And
Right.
some of the description that I really like that you about Yemen, what you said is their people, they are very humble. They're very hospitable. Well, I think the whole Arab world, but the humbleness part is really in them.
Yes.
And when you were talking about the bakery, I know one time when I was talking to a woman from Yemen, she was talking about that they had over 100 types of breads that they baked.
Yeah.
I was so surprised by that. Yeah, it is it something that you were able to revisit that country since you left? Have you been able to go back there?
No, not really. I would love to go back again, but yeah, God willing, I'll go back
Yeah,
someday. Yeah.
inshallah.
But you know, in Dearborn, it was interesting because where we lived in Dearborn, many Yemeni people were already living there, but then they started moving into our neighborhood, and I was just like, wow, praise God. Here I am 35 years later, and God brought all these Yemenis back to my doorstep and to my neighborhood, and we had such a beautiful time there, and my kids are outside playing with the Yemeni neighbors. It was beautiful. Yeah.
Was there something specific that ignited your love for filmmaking and media, or was it a process that grew over time?
Yeah, so I think it's really about stories. I don't see my job as so much a technical endeavor, and I'm not really this huge artistic type person who, I know really artsy people and they just do beautiful art and amazing. I'm more of like a story person. So yeah, just my parents telling me stories, hearing stories, watching movies, and then so in the small town context, so after Yemen, I'm in this Midvale, Idaho. There's 208 people, I think, was the population, farming community. There wasn't a lot to do. You would work and you'd go to school, you play sports, but me and my friends, we would watch movies. And so I loved certain movies and I kind of studied them and I'd watch them over and over. And I was kind of envisioning, well, how would I make that movie? And then my high school science teacher, he got some equipment, some video equipment to help us learn scientific principles. And it was a video editing suite. And so me and my friends, we would go in and make these videos about, physics and, gravity and just different scientific concepts. And I really enjoyed that. And then the last thing, just before I decided to go to college and study film, was me and my friends, we would watch Saturday Night Live and all those comedy sketches, and we would kind of remake Hans and Franz and these silly, goofy videos, and we'd show them to our friends and we'd laugh. And so it was kind of something to do in the small town, honestly, because we were bored.
But then it got to the point where you majored in
Yeah.
that field and pursuing it, and which is great. I had the chance over time to look at the videos that you created. We'll discuss that in a little bit.
Oh, thank
So
you.
what was your experience working on projects produced at Warner Brother Television, Sony Pictures Studio, and other major production companies in California? And how did that experience influence the work that you do today?
Yeah. Well, I learned a lot. Of course, it was early in my career. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So again, I was kind of just soaking in information. It was very fast paced and competitive. So you had to work quickly and work well. It was interesting. I think one of the things I think back on that time, everyone in Hollywood, my experience was, it may be different for others, but everyone seemed to have an agenda or a mission. They came with a purpose. They weren't just there, randomly. So I was kind of, trying to figure out all of that. And I was asking these questions. Well, what's my mission? What's my purpose? And how do I fit into all of this? I learned collaboration, teamwork. To me, that's one of the beautiful things about filmmaking and media, is that you can't just do everything. You can't write and direct and act and do everything in the same project. You need other people around you. And one of my favorite things is to watch the credits at the end of a film and see, wow, there's the lighting guys and the grips and the gaffers and the production assistants and the writers. It's just thousands of people in the credits, and I go, wow, that's really cool. They had to collaborate and work together to make this project come to fruition. And then I was more of kind of I had a variety of talents. I wasn't really good at any one thing, but I like to do a lot of different things. And I think my experience in Hollywood was, you kind of had to choose one thing and do it well. And I went into the writing, screenwriting, and development side of things, and I enjoyed it. But I think at the end, when I moved out of Hollywood and started working with SIL International, I really wanted to do a lot of different things and not just be stuck into one particular talent or position. And so that was my experience there in a nutshell. Yeah.
And that's a lot. I mean, getting all that. My experience from film school originally, it was from, I mean, with film was with in film school, and I just, for me personally, from everything that I've studied and worked at, I always feel like a hands-on experience is the strongest way. So everything that you're saying, they tried to teach us that, which I think, they tried to do a great job at it, but there's nothing like hands-on, because once you get into that sphere, it's a totally different story. So,
right.
and you mentioned SIL International. So you work as an international media consultant there. So what is SIL International, and what does your work consist of?
Yeah, so I'll read you something on that just to start with. But SIL, it's a global faith-based nonprofit that works with local communities around the world to develop language solutions that expand possibilities for a better life. And so the way I would distill that is that language matters. Language is the key part of a person's life, their identity. We talk about culture, and I'm going to go learn Yemeni culture, for example. When I start learning Yemeni culture and I ask, why do you do that behavior? Why do you make that food? There's always a linguistic component. There's always a language component to it. You can't learn about someone or their culture or why they do things without learning the language. So SIL is all about languages. There's over 7,000 languages in the world. And so SIL's goal is to continue. So those languages matter. We don't want to see them die. We want to encourage their usage. And so, you probably experience this as a Chaldean, right? There's Aramaic languages, Assyrian languages. Chaldean is its own language, but there's these forces at work that want to just say, oh, everyone speak Arabic or everyone just speak English, And SIL doesn't believe that. We believe your language matters and you should communicate in that language of the heart, the language that matters most to you. It's good to learn another language, second, third languages. That's great. That's awesome. We need to do that in this world, but we don't want to forget the mother tongue, the language that was spoken in our home. And so my particular role with SIL is I come alongside language communities and different projects in those communities, and I try to help them develop media strategies of how to, whether it's a literacy program or they're developing some video clips or audio clips, or they want to educate people about COVID-19 and help them design and put together social media campaigns or just producing the content itself. So there's a lot of different elements there, but it's really to elevate these languages that are being used all over the world. So I've worked on a lot of different languages. I don't always understand them, but I try to apply my media skills to help. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't learned of it until now. And you're right. One of the things that we do at the Chaldean Cultural Center is try to find ways to help document and even preserve the Aramaic Chaldean dialect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just because now you realize, like over time, with the community being in diaspora, that you have more the chance of losing that language and it
Yes.
going extinct. So you become more concerned about that. And so I didn't know. It's really impressive and beautiful that you see organizations understanding the value of that and trying to nurture the communities that
Yes.
are also doing something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it can be very controversial. I mean, there's a lot of governments that try to suppress
I
uh, minority languages, and they just want to make their country one language and get rid of the other ones. And so our work at times can be touchy or sensitive because if we're advocating for smaller languages, it can make some people not happy, you know. So there's a sensitivity there, but
Well,
we
we
believe,
take that for granted living here in, in the United States. We're just
right.
trying to find ways to do it, but we take for granted that, yeah, a lot of countries sometimes don't have that kind of, sometimes they don't have the freedom actually, literally, to
Yeah,
do these kind of things. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so we're advocates for all of those languages. Yeah.
wonderful. So what are some of the major projects? Well, I think I wanted, oh, here's the question I was going to say, because
It's
I
okay.
moved through, and the main business that I knew you through is Sabeel Media.
Yes.
And so you're also the director of Sabeel Media, and it's a nonprofit organization. So what is the story of Sabeel Media? When and why was it formed?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm the director of Sabeel Media, and we've been working since 2007. So I was living in Dearborn. It's a Michigan-based nonprofit, 501c3 IRS, under the IRS. So yeah, so looking back, you know, when it started, it was pretty basic in a way. Sabeel is about access for everyone, and I'm specifically talking at the first level was about the Bible and scriptures, because you know, just as I was working with SIL and living in Dearborn, one of the things I was noticing, and when you start a nonprofit, there's always kind of a problem statement that you work with. Why do we exist? And what I was noticing was that there were many communities that didn't have access to the Bible in a language that they understood or a form that they understood. It's not always about language, but sometimes it's about the form. You know, many times people don't read, for example. They're you know, pre-literate, or, and so how can we get scriptures in a form that they understand, whether it's through recitation or music or chant or poetry or storytelling or video formats. And then there is a language component to what Sabeel does too, because you know, there's modern standard Arabic. Most people who study Arabic, they find this out quickly. And then there's other types of Arabic dialects in various countries. And so one of the unique things about Sabeel, and again, this can be controversial, but we produce Bible stories in the dialects. So Iraqi dialect, you know, Syrian dialect, Lebanese dialect, Egyptian dialect, and you know, some people have the belief that no, you know, God's story should only be in the formal, you know, old style Arabic. But we try to make it accessible again, so that everyone, you know, men, women, children, literate, illiterate, can have access to those stories. Yeah. And then I would also say with Sabeel, there was kind of this partnership collaboration idea, back to what I mentioned, that, you know, we feel like things are better done in community and as a team. And so, you know, if you just have like imagine you have three Christians in a room and they're trying to make a video of a Bible story, you know, they only have so many ideas and such a limit to what they can communicate in that story. But if we bring in, you know, Muslims and Christians, and we're collaborating together, and that's part of our ethos, is collaboration with Muslims and Christians to make the scriptures more understandable, we come up with something better, something different, something more unique, and that has a broader appeal, because we want Christians to have increased access to the scriptures, but Muslims, you know, they also have the right to have access to God's word, to God's stories in a way that they understand. And so we continue working in that. So many times it's about the art forms. Our slogan is we're a wellspring of media arts. And that's kind of one of my core beliefs of the scriptures, is that the scriptures weren't just created or given by God as a academic endeavor. Oh, let's sit down and study the book, that's one part of it. But, there's so many genres that are beautiful, there's the Psalms of David, there's poetry, there's music, scripture's been written in different genres, and we need to retain that artistic form, because if we worship a creative God and his word is creative, why can't we communicate it in a creative way? It doesn't have to be stale and boring and academic.
Exactly, yes. And a lot of people, especially the elderly in the Arab world, and they're very faith-based, but they don't read and write. And so, but the faith is in their heart, because I think they do use that creative component.
Yes.
To take in, just like you as a child when you were in Yemen, when you were saying, it's like that innocence that allows you to take in more, and sometimes words or having it in a scholarly way sometimes takes away from that. What are some of the major projects that have been made through Sabeel Media?
Yeah, so our first major project was called Scenes from the Heavenly Books, and it was a set of short films that we based on a set of audio dramas called Qasas al-Anbiya, and we just had little vignettes. They weren't complete stories, but just little short film vignettes. And then, we don't want to just be we felt like our mission needed to be more expansive and include other projects. And part of that came from, like you were mentioning earlier, we met at the Naja conference, and just being in the community, wanting to be a part of the community, wanting to partner and collaborate. I would just talk to people and ask questions, and what are the needs? What would be helpful? How can Sabeel Media serve the community? We have an attitude of we want to be a servant of all. And some of my takeaways from that Naja conference was that there was this need for the Mediterranean, Arab, Middle Eastern community to tell stories, their own stories, and have them heard by a broader audience. And so I felt like, well, maybe that's something Sabeel could do. So we started a number of projects, one of them called The Refugee Experience, and we produced probably 9 short documentary clips, just interviewing different refugees from different countries. One of them, Chaldean woman, Shoshana. Maybe we can put the link to that short film on the Facebook page or after this interview. But yeah, just trying to help tell people stories. So that one. And then we have 2, just to mention what's coming. We're trying to move into animation. We did a summer animation project for about 5 years with different students that were learning animation. And at this point, we have 2 short animated films in development, one called Sabr Ayub, The Patience of Job. That story, we really feel strongly it's a story that's going to communicate powerfully to Muslims and Christians. So many people are suffering these days, traumatized, they're hurt, they're being bombed in their homes, they're being starved in their country because of blockades. And this story of Sabr Ayub, this prophet could endure great suffering and yet maintain his honor and integrity and his righteousness, I think is a powerful story that we need to tell. So look for that. It's in development, and hopefully we'll get that out.
Sounds exciting. And yeah. I have to say that when I was watching those refugee stories, I really enjoyed them. Yes, there was a that you interviewed that I really felt I could relate to as a child leaving Iraq and having to do it kind of in secrecy. But there were a lot of other stories from like people different background. It wasn't just, there was a Shia imam that had to leave as well. And so there's various stories, and they're all very interesting. And I want to thank you for covering these stories and giving Arab Americans a voice, because, I want to ask you like how you got involved, if you're 8 years living in Yemen and then you're 17 years living in Dearborn, influenced your work today at SIL International and Sabeel Media, and is there a certain focus, especially with Sabeel Media, on that world?
Yeah, so I guess the way I would answer that is it's yeah, what I so connecting my time in Yemen and my time in Dearborn with SIL and Sabeel, it's about learning. I want to come as a learner. You know, I'm not somebody who has this great message or ability to impart to somebody else. It's more, I want to learn, I want to grow. Um, that's how I approach life. I want to collaborate with people. You know, when you're I guess the best way to say it. So if I go back to my small town in Idaho, which I consider home, and I'm going to sit down and have a meal with my friends in Idaho, I love that. But I look around the table and I think, these people, they look like me, they talk like me, they have the same ideas as me, and that's fine. That's good. You need that, but I feel like there's a limit to how I can grow. But when I sit across the table from my Yemeni friend, with Rashid, or my Jordanian friend Samir, and we start talking, I feel like their ideas, the way they see the world, their perspective, it's so much different and so much broader and diverse. And so I want to learn from that diversity. I don't want to just learn from people that look and talk like me. So that's kind of, I guess, what I would say about all those years living cross culturally, is in this diversity and in this form of learning. And maybe that learning posture too, as I reflect back, maybe I've kind of developed a learning posture just because of that humility of realizing I don't know everything. My language doesn't communicate everything well. My culture doesn't do everything right. America's not this great thing that does everything perfectly. We have our flaws. So what can I learn from you and how you do things? And that's very much what I would say those years of influence has been on me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's wonderful that you have that feeling of what you learned from it. I feel the same way. I've traveled to many countries and learned from various, from the Western world, from the Eastern world, and I think it's a beautiful thing that at the end of the day, you kind of take from that experience and from that learning, and somehow, maybe intentionally or not, kind of serve those communities, because the Arab American community is one that doesn't really have that much of an opportunity to tell stories that are not necessarily stereotyped, or to have their voices heard. And I don't know if maybe they're a fairly new community in the United States, but regardless of the reason, when I was watching the videos that Sabeel has to offer, it just felt nice that they have that opportunity. So yeah, and then
And we're trying to bring those stories, I think part of the unique, because there are those stories out there,
mhm,
but I think what Sabeel is also trying to do is bring those stories to kind of a traditional American Western audience that hasn't heard those stories,
right,
because
right,
I think
right.
within your community, you've probably heard those stories,
Within
but
our community, right, right. So it's
but in my community,
amazing.
I don't think they've heard those, and they need to hear them. So I think that's part of that collaborating, bridge building. How can we be a bridge
Yes,
to?
exactly. And the non-Arab world, normally what they have access to more easily are more of the stereotypical stories that are kind of like just kind of focus on one area, where here what I like is that the people are expressing their experience, their journey from their country to here, and it's more personal, it's very intimate, and I really enjoyed watching those.
Oh, thank
um,
you, thank you so
so
much.
from your observation, how can the Arab world use storytelling to empower themselves and their communities? Because obviously you got a sense early on that this is a very powerful tool. And how can the Arab world use that more? I think even maybe just even to say more often, or maybe what you said earlier is not, they are creating a lot of beautiful, like they have beautiful music and wonderful films that I still watch until today and stuff, but maybe reach it to the other side, to the Western world, so that there's a different perspective about what that world is about, or the people, rather than just kind of, it seems like more of a political nature, the things that come, and there's always that focus on the destructiveness of that region.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so my observations. I mean, again, I'm a learner here, and so um, I guess a couple things I would say is, you know, my feeling is that um, there's so much to offer the rest of the world that is not aware of what the Arab community or Chaldean community can bring to the West. So I guess the examples of stories, you just keep telling your stories. There's many beautiful stories from your part of the world. Actually, and when you think about it, like religiously, from the Jews, the Muslims, the Christians, I mean, all those stories, they originate from that area anyway. They're not stories that came from my people group.
Right. I mean,
So,
we have amazing stories. I mean, when I talk about like
yeah,
cradle of civilization and all the wonderful things that were invented there, and they're
right.
feels buried within all the other stuff that happened in the modern times.
Yes, I would just say keep doing what you're doing, like be proud of it. Like you have this rich culture and history and longevity and stuff things to offer the rest of us that we need to hear it. And so just kind of own that, be proud of it, keep doing it. I would say I would highlight poetry though, is man, I think growing up I experienced poetry in some ways, English poetry, and it's okay, and I enjoyed some of it. But man, when I came into contact with Arabic poetry, and then watching, there's American Idol here, but then over in the Gulf, they have the Poet of a Million. I don't know if you've heard of that show, but where there's poets from all over the Middle East, they come together and they go on the stage and they just they're given a topic or idea and they start reciting poetry, and then the judges talk about which one was the best. I mean, to me, that's so beautiful. Like, keep doing these beautiful art forms so the rest of us can benefit from them. And I know there's so many more stories I'm not even aware of that could be told, in big movies or short films that the rest of the world can benefit from. So
Well,
I would say, keep bringing those stories to life. Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of what, like this last question that we have is, what advice would you give Arab Americans wanting to pursue the film and media business? I guess it's, you know, to just to do that and to keep doing it, not to to keep that momentum
Yeah.
of pursuing that.
Yeah, but I would add on that one specifically, it's about connections and relationships. And the Arabs that I know, they're very good at relationships, very personal, very so. And what I experienced in Hollywood, I'm talking about Hollywood and the film business and so forth. It's mostly run on connections, who and relationships. And so, there is this part where you have to know what you're talking. You can't be totally ignorant of everything and not be able to do your job. But most of the jobs you will get, or most of the phone calls or interviews you'll get, it's because I know a guy who knows a lady, and you get the interview or you get the job because of who you know. So just be conscious of that. Try to meet people, try to network. It'll help you a lot.
So be okay with stepping outside of the community to reach, the people that are
Most definitely, yeah.
in the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, other people that are doing it and can help you get there. And then don't forget to also help other people get there.
That's an important point, because I read somewhere one time, I forgot the book, I still have it, but he said the way to succeed in the film industry is have a good script, good talent, and God, have faith in God. And that he said helping one person or doing one good thing a day to help somebody will get you there somehow or another. So,
Okay, good. Yeah.
there we are. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for today's interview.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Watching your work, and I will put, as he mentioned, we will put some of the links that Sabeel Media have focused on. They're short and very beautiful and very effective. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. And yeah, God bless you and have a great day.
Take care. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.